So, Sonia, after a few technical difficulties, welcome to What If I Say Yes? How are you today?
Thank you. I'm doing well. How are you?
Fine, fine.
Good.
Okay, so please introduce yourself to my audience. Who are you, Sonia?
Well, my name is Sonia Rucker. I am a higher ed administrator. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm an auntie. I'm a great auntie. And I am someone who really enjoys the work that I do and takes a lot of pleasure from being around my family and my friends and just enjoying life.
Lovely. Okay, so now please tell the audience how is it that we connected?
Well, we were introduced by my friend, Sarah Hernandez. So Sarah and I have known each other since I moved to Ithaca the first time about 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you've known her longer than I.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, so we met because our daughters were different ages. Mine is 14 and Isa is 8.
Yeah.
They do gymnastics. They go to the same gym.
Oh, okay.
And so they started at the same level 2. And that year we became very good friends with Sarah, Veng, and Isa became very good friends with Maya, my daughter.
Nice.
Since then, it happened, but it's like maybe 2 years,
Since
maybe 2 years. So 2 years against 20.
yeah. It's quite a
You've
while.
known her longer.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and then as I say in some of my interviews, how I started this channel is by interviewing the people I knew, and then the people my husband knew, and then I had to start. So
Expanding.
it's either I interviewed everybody who wanted to be interviewed, or I don't have any more ideas. So then I started asking the people I know if they knew people who they would recommend for this project. And very recently I asked Sarah, and she said, well, I have one, Sonia.
Nice.
So then she connected us, and here we are. So what was that moment in your life when you asked the question, what if I say yes? You said yes and did something. What is it that you chose to share with me today?
Sure. So the moment for me was when I said yes to accepting a job here at Cornell, and that was in 2003.
Okay. What job?
So the job that I accepted was Associate Director of Counseling and Community Outreach, and it was in the Office of Minority Educational Affairs here at Cornell. And that office is still active, but it has a different name. But at the time, I accepted the role as an associate director, and it was for me a big deal to say yes, because I knew absolutely no one in Ithaca. I was living in Missouri. I was living in Missouri where I grew up. I had a job there at a university, Southeast Missouri State University. I had shortly made a transition from being a social worker into higher education. So that was my first job in higher ed. And I had only been there since 1999. I enjoyed it. It was home. My mother was there. I had a couple of siblings there, and I was in a position that was a temporary position for a year, and the director wanted to make me permanent, but we found out from the HR director that I would have to interview for the job and they would have to post it. And so I was a little, nervous about that, but I said, okay, I'll go ahead and interview for the job. So I got my resume updated, ready to go. And as I was about to apply for this job, I saw other jobs that were on the Chronicle of Higher Education. So I thought, well, I may as well interview or apply at least for other positions. And one of those jobs I applied for was here at Cornell University. And it was,
You
yeah, it was just kind of a random, did it quickly and just submitted my material.
you've never been to Ithaca before?
I never been to New York.
You've never been in New York, period. Oh my goodness.
No. No, I had never been to Ithaca, I had never been to New York. And honestly, when I applied for the job, I was thinking they're not going to, I mean, this wasn't a high level job. It was an associate director position. And I thought, why would they reach out to someone in Missouri? So I thought, they have the whole East Coast before they even get to me. So I honestly didn't even expect to hear from them. Yeah.
So you applied, you're thinking this is not gonna happen.
Yeah.
And then
I was at home. It was actually on a Sunday. I was in my apartment and I was just like watching. I love to watch old movies. It was a Sunday. I'm lying on the couch. My cell phone rings and there's this lady named Melinda Smith, and she says, calling about your application to Cornell. And I said, where? And so she said, you applied for a job at Cornell University, right? And I said, yeah, I did. And so she's like, well, we'd like to do a phone interview. And I was like, oh, okay. So I thought, okay, sure, I can do that. So we set up a time and date, and I ended up doing the phone interview in my office at the university. And I just closed my door. I did the phone interview, and again, just kind of let it go, didn't think about it. And one day I got another call and they said, we'd like to bring you to Ithaca to interview. And I thought, what? Are you serious? And so, I mean, I was really just blown away. I just could not believe that this was kind of moving forward. And I said, okay. So we kind of set up the date and time, and it was going to be coming up fairly quickly. And I did something I'm a little embarrassed about, but I didn't tell anyone I was coming for the interview.
You didn't tell anyone from
My family? No one. I told my sister just because I wanted her to know. I said, look, I'm going to St. Louis. I'm going for an interview. And I did go to St. Louis to get on the plane to New York, but I didn't stop. So
it was half a lie.
It was half a lie. And I did eventually tell her. So when I got here, I did call her and I told her, I said, hey, I came for an interview. And the interview was intense. It was an all-day interview. I got here, I stayed at the Statler Hotel, which was so beautiful. The campus was amazing. It was just, Ithaca was just like, I had never seen any place like this. And so
now, what time of the year? Because it's a different experience if you come summer, spring, summer, or fall, winter.
Yeah, it was mid to late August.
Okay.
So it was, I mean, and Missouri is horrible in the summer. It's hot, sticky, and humid. And here, it was still breezy and nice in the evening. And so it was just like, oh God, this place is amazing. And so I had an all-day interview beginning at 7:30 with breakfast, and went on to do a presentation in front of all these people. And, I interviewed until that night. I went to dinner at the boatyard with some people from the community. I mean, this was intense. I had never done anything like this. So by the time I got to my hotel that night, I was exhausted. I was like, oh my God. So, but I still was very excited, but honestly, still just thinking like, oh, this was a chance of a lifetime, but it's not going to happen. So I went back to Missouri, went back to my life, went back to work. The job that I had applied for there, I think I interviewed at that time, did a great job. I felt very confident and everything was, good. And then one day I walked into my office and our admin assistant, she says, did you interview for a job in New York? And I was like, what? So she goes, somebody from Cornell called wanting to talk to Dr. Wynn, my boss. And I was like, what? He goes, did you interview for a job in New York? And I was like, yes. And she's like, I think they want to offer you a job. They want a reference. They want to talk to him. And I was like, so I like went into my office, I closed the door, and I'm thinking like, oh man, what does this mean? And so my phone rang, and it was Ray Dalton, who was the director of the job here in Ithaca. And he said, I talked to your boss. I got a reference from him, and I said, I heard. And so he goes, I just wanted you to know he was very positive about you. He loves you. He really is trying to keep you there. But I want you here.
I want you more.
Yes. He goes, I want to offer you a job. And I mean, I was speechless. And I just said, you want to offer me a job? You want me to move there? He's like, yes. And I was just like, I said, this is so unexpected. I'm totally surprised. I didn't know you would even think to offer me a job. So I need to think about it. And he said, okay. He's like, now, I've already talked to your boss. He is not willing to let you go. So I just want to make it clear to you, you don't know me, but I think you would be amazing here. You would do a great job. You're going to love it. And he's like, if you have any questions, we can talk. But he's like, I want you to really consider this. And so I said, okay. And I said, just give me, please, a couple of days. And he said, okay. And from there, I thought, oh my God, I have to tell my family because they don't even know I went to New York. It was just this, like, my mind is just racing. And at that time, I heard my boss walking down the hall, and he's at my door, and I'm starting to panic. And so, he knocks, he comes in, he goes, well, Cornell. And I say, yeah, Cornell.
I'm sorry. Well, what did he say?
He said, well, so Cornell. And I said, yeah, Cornell. And he goes, when did you go to Ithaca? And so I'm like, it was a few weeks ago. And I said, honestly, I had no expectation that they would pick me, And so he was actually very sweet. He's like, of course they would pick you. You're great. He's like, I'm not surprised. And he said, I want you to stay here. And he's like, I'm going to do everything I can to keep you. And he says, but I understand you need to think about this. And I say, yeah, I do. And so, he was so amazing. He was very supportive. He just said, I know you need to kind of talk to your family and think through a lot of things. And he's like, but just know, I want you to stay here and work with me. And I said, okay. So after that, I received a phone call from what he would have been our equity officer. And so he and I knew each other. So he called and he said, you are not going to Ithaca. He's like, I don't know what they're offering you, but whatever they're offering you, we'll match it. We want you to stay. And he's like, have you been to Ithaca in the winter? It's cold, it's ice, it's snow. And he's like, you are not going to be happy there. He was just like going through all of the reasons why it's so far away from home and your family. And I was just like, look, I just need some time to think. And he was like, okay, but he's like, really, what do we need to give you, to kind of, he actually, started talking about salary. And he's like, look, I see so much promise in you. I think you're going to move up here. I can see you, being in an executive role here in a few years. He's like, you're so young. As I was in my, like, just hitting, I had only been working in higher ed for a few years. I had been in grad school before that. So he's like, you're going to have a really bright future. And I think you can do that here. So, I was extremely torn. I think I left my office after that call, and I didn't come back. I just got in my car and just started driving and just thinking and just trying to figure out what do I do? Like, this is a big.
So what were the things going through your mind? What were you considering at that point?
My family, my mother was in Missouri. I lived 30 minutes from her. She was at that time, and so 20 plus years ago, she was in her mid to late 70s. I had my brothers and sisters there, nieces and nephews. It was home. I didn't know one person in Ithaca. I didn't know one person in New York. I didn't even know how I was going to move to New York. I wasn't making a ton of money. I was thinking, like, can I even afford to live there? How will this work? You know, I'm going to get there and be miserable and not know anyone and be depressed, and I'm going to have to come back home and everybody's going to say, you know, why did you do that? I mean, I just kind of like started creating all of these scenarios in my head. And then the other piece was my older brother Wade, who my father died when I was 9. So my brother Wade, I'm the youngest of 9 kids. So being the baby of the family, there's a lot of people who kind of look out for me. And when I had to make decisions in my life, I would typically, you know, talk to them. And my older brother Wade was going to be the person who I was going to get hit. I would need his approval. It was going to be important to me, you know, he's the kind of like the patriarch of our family. So I just was like, God, I'm going to have to talk to Wade and see what he says, because I knew in my heart, if he was upset or disappointed, I wasn't going to do it. The same with my mom. So
you're driving, going where?
Yeah, I'm like in the middle of nowhere. I'm on this long country road and like cows and fields, and I'm just driving and thinking all of this. And then eventually I'm like, okay, so the first thing is to let people know, you know, so starting with my sister's my ally. She's my partner in crime. So she and I can
the one you told you were going to St. Louis?
Yes. So I was like, I need to get to Brenda and tell Brenda, and then Brenda can kind of help me devise a plan of action. So I found her and told her about the job offer. And I mean, after her being like, can't believe you did, what did you think was going to happen? I can't believe you went there and didn't tell anybody. And I was just like, oh, I know. Now stop. Just tell me what to do. And so she's like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. This feels, you know, it's like choosing between home and this other unknown. You know, it was scary. But at the same time, there was this excitement, this anticipation, like this could be an opportunity of a lifetime. I mean, going to New York, who wouldn't want to go to New York? I mean, it was Ithaca, but it was still New York. And Cornell, it's an Ivy League institution, like one of the top universities in the country. And you're like, you're working. I mean, I love where I worked. I love the office, the program, the students. It was an amazing place. But in comparison, as someone who is in higher education, you want to work for the best institution. And Cornell was one of the best. And so then it became between my family and my job, my family and my career. You know, what do I choose? And I mean, I don't think I even slept that night. Just remember just kind of lying in bed, just kind of thinking.
Wait, you spoke with her?
Yeah.
She said, what do you want to do?
Yeah. And that's when I just started thinking, what do I want to do? Like thinking about the pros and the cons. What makes sense?
That was just that day.
Yeah.
And then the next day, what happened?
So the next morning I get up. So I had decided I was going to talk to some people that I knew, who I trusted and felt like they would give me some good advice. So there was a man that worked in our career services office. He had been someone I'd gone to previously just to kind of talk through things. He was a really nice guy, very wise. And so I went down to his office and asked if I could speak to him. And I told him, you know, I had this job offer, and he like reached back, he got this book, and it was this book of like top institutions. So he goes through, he finds Cornell, he looks at it and he reads it, and he's like, he like put it in front of me and he's like, take a look at that. And so I'm reading it and it's like all the highlights of Cornell. And he's like, I mean, you're planning to stay in higher education, right? And I said, yes. And he's like, this is the career that you've chosen. And I said, yes. And he said, well, why wouldn't you go to Cornell? Why would your career not be, you know, why would that not be the best place for you to have this career in higher education? And I said, it is probably. I said, but there's other things to consider. And he's like, what? And I was like, my family. And he's like, well, your family's going to be here. He's like, they're not going anywhere. He's like, well, you're young. You can come back and see them. He's like, you know, these are things I think you should be thinking about. But he said, you know, from what I know about you, your career is very important. And so he's like, I think you should, at this point in your life, be considering taking a chance and maybe giving your career a chance to flourish at a place like Cornell. And so, I mean, of course, this is the career services director. Of course, he's talking about my career. So then I'm like, so, okay, I need to talk to some other people. And I ended up, I stayed at work that day. My boss and I, we talked a couple of times. And he had talked to our HR director. They made me an offer. They told me what the offer was, the salary. I called Dr. Dalton here at Cornell, and I told him they had countered his offer, and he made another counter offer.
Oh my goodness.
Because he said, what other concerns do you have? And I said, well, I don't know anyone there. I don't have a place to live. I said, I'd have to find, you know, an apartment. And I said, there's a lot that needs to be done for me to even think about moving to New York. And I'm like, I'm not wealthy. I don't have like money lying around to like transition into another state. And so he's like, give me a little while and I'll call you back. And I said, okay. So it was probably like an hour or two later, he called back and he said, well, we can find you an apartment. We will pay your rent for 6 months.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And he upped the salary again. Yeah. And he said, I really want you to come here. He's like, I think you'll do great here. I think you'll be an asset to us. And he's like, I want you to really think about this. She just solved one big problem, like housing for 6 months. So I was just thinking like, man, this is really kind of working out, you know? So one of the big problems I had was being able to move there and find a place and be able to afford it. And now he's kind of taken that problem off my plate. And so I called my sister and I told her, and she's like, oh, that's fantastic. She's like, so what do you want to do? And I said, well, I mean, I don't know. I need to talk to Dr. Nguyen. Now, the thing with Dr. Nguyen, so when I started working at the university, I was in another department. I was working in TRIO. So I was working with students with disabilities, students who were underrepresented minorities, and students who were part of this TRIO program, which were typically underrepresented low-income students. And so I really enjoyed what I was doing, but I was very interested in working with students with disabilities. And Dr. Nguyen, that was the office that he oversaw. It was the academic services. So they did tutoring, they did, you know, workshops, and he also coordinated disability accommodations. And I had reached out to him and told him I was interested in learning about, you know, working with students with disability. And he just started giving me material. We started meeting and talking, and he was just like sharing all of this information with me. And at one point, his assistant director, who I was friends with, she got engaged and was planning to move to be with her new husband in St. Louis. So her job was going to be open. And Dr. Nguyen said, would you take this job? And I was like, yes. So we were like, able to get me a 1-year contract as an interim assistant director. And in that year, I mean, I just learned so much from him. I just loved what I was doing. I was in a completely different job. I was, coordinating academic workshops and doing tutoring and learning about accommodations. He had sent me to a couple of conferences. So, I mean, I felt like I was really thriving. And then Dr. Nguyen at the end of that year, he said, I just like to make you permanent. So I'm going to talk to the HR director. But they had a new HR director. And he said, no, we have to post it. She has to interview for it. So that was where, we were at this point. And he was actually apologizing and saying, I wish I had fought harder just to make you permanent. I hate that we, at this point, because if we had just given you the job as you should have received it, we wouldn't be here now. But he said, but we are here now. And he said, I was thinking about this all last night. And he was like, how fond I am of you. How much I appreciate the work that you do. But this is a great opportunity for you. And he's like, as much as I would love to have you here, I am going to tell you that you should take this job at Cornell. He said, go. He's like, I think you'll do an amazing job. I think you'll love it. And he said, but if you don't, you can come back and I'll give you a job anytime. And so that was it. That was kind of, what I needed, because I appreciated him so much. Part of me was dreading disappointing him and kind of throwing away, everything that he had given me and just walking away. I felt horrible about that. I didn't even realize it until he said it, how much that was, weighing on me. And so I was just like, okay, I really kind of felt like this weight, like, okay, that was what I needed to hear. And so,
but now wait, because we have covered everything, but your family.
My family.
I'm dying to know what happened.
Oh yeah, so that was it. So I had to go home. I drove home, went in to see my mom, and my mom is like every mom, like when you walk through the door, she's like, hi, so happy to see me, and how are you? And oh, you look so nice. And I was like, oh God. And then I was just like, God, how am I going to be away from her? Like, when you walk in and see your mom, those days are, and I'm going to be 1,800 miles away from that. So, I was like, Mommy, I have something to tell you. She's like, what? And I said, I got a job offer. And she's like, a job offer where you are now? And I was like, no. And she goes, where? And I said, at another university. And I said, Cornell. And she said, where is that? And I said, it's in New York. And she said, New York? And she's like, how did they even find you? How did they even know about you? And I was like, well, I interviewed for a job there. And she said, on the phone? And I said, well, no. She's like, you went to New York? And I said, yeah. And she was just like sitting there. And I was like, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you. I didn't think, I didn't want you to worry. I didn't know if anything would come from it. I just wanted to go and see what it was like. And I said, but they offered me a job. And I mean, she was unusually quiet. And I just couldn't read like what she was thinking. And so we were just kind of sitting there. And then she said, well, she said, do you want to go? And I said, yeah, mommy, I think I want to go. And so she goes, well, if that's what you want to do, she's like, but you know, you have to talk to Wade. And I say, yeah, I know, I need to talk to Wade. And so she goes, well, you know, if you talk to him and after him, you know, saying whatever he has to say, if you want to go, you know, she's like, I'm going to miss you, but if you go, you know, I'll be happy for you. And I was like, okay. So, I mean, I was just like, gosh, I didn't know what to expect, but I don't think I expected that.
I'm crying already.
Are you? No.
What a gift she gave you.
Yeah,
She's
absolutely.
letting you know if this
Yeah.
is what you want,
Yeah, she's
it's
just
fine.
wanted me to be happy. She's, you know, she said, I support you. So,
Mhm.
and went up, my brother Wade lives like a couple blocks away. So I drove up, he was outside.
Mhm.
And I walked up and, you know, gave him a hug and he's like, what are you doing here? Cause it was like, it wasn't on the weekend. And I said, oh, I have some news. And so I said, like, again, like I got a job offer. I said, I went to New York a few weeks ago. I just thought I would go and interview. I didn't expect anything to happen, but they offered me a job. And he was like, in New York? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, but it's so far away. And he's like, in New York City. I was like, no, it's not New York City. I was like, it's Ithaca. I was like,
A
it's
little bit
literally,
further.
yeah. I was like, it's I was like, it's so small and beautiful, and there's waterfalls and trees, and it's like in the middle of nowhere. It's so safe. And so I'm just kind of trying to head off any concerns that he had. And I was like, and so I realized I hadn't even said where. And he goes, what school? And I said, Cornell. And he's like, Cornell. And he's like, that's a big deal, honey. And I was like, I know. And he goes, he's like, well, what mom say? And I told him, you know, she said she'll support me. And he goes, well, I just I hate that you're not gonna be here and you know, I won't get to see you. But he was like, you know, it sounds like this is a good deal for you. And so he goes, well, you know, I support you too. And I was like, oh, yeah. Yay. Yeah, that was at that point, you know, everything was I mean, within 2 days, just kind of fell in place. And the next day, I told Dr. Wynn, and then I went in my office and I called Dr. Dalton, and I accepted it. And from there, it just kind of took off because I had to tell everybody. Like it did, like every university, like news flies around. And so the guy that had called and told me how horrible I would, you know, how Ithaca would be, called me, and he's like, please tell me that you didn't take the job. And I said, I did. And he's like, "Ah, I can't believe it. And he's like, are you sure? And I was like, I am sure. And he said, okay. He's like, well, Dr. Wynn told me you know, that he told you you can come back if it doesn't work out. And he's like, and I just want to, you know, second that and say, you know, we
Oh.
want to have you back if you ever decide to. I was like, thank you. So yeah, that was it. And like from there, just started making plans to come to Ithaca.
So from there to the day you moved, how many days or weeks or months went by?
It was a few weeks. It was literally maybe 2 or 3 weeks because the semester was starting. And, you know,
Oh,
so
fairly quick.
yeah, they were, I mean, Dr. Dalton had found me an apartment. He sent me the photos and he's like, we found you a place. And he's like, it's nice. It's a 1-bedroom apartment. It's close to campus, a safe space. And he is like, we got the rent paid. He's like, all you got to do when you come is go by the office, get the keys and move in. And so
Wow.
he's like, if you could come, he's like, I know this is a lot to ask, but we'd love to have you for the start of the semester, as close to the start of the semester. And so I said, okay. I'm like, that's going to be crazy. I mean, I didn't have a house. I was living in an apartment. So I just had to kind of like decide, okay, what can I take? He found me a furnished apartment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it became, you know, just get rid of all of my stuff. So I started giving things to students and selling things. My sister and I just started packing everything up, got a U-Haul, got all of that scheduled. And I mean, it was so fast. So within 2 weeks. And then, so I flew to New York. And now I'm like, I got to drive to New York from Missouri. And this is 2003. There's no GPS.
Oh
So
my goodness.
I went to the public library and like went to Google Maps and printed off like 55 pages of directions from Sikeston, Missouri to Ithaca, New York. It's like a stack of directions. And then I just started like mapping it out. I have this atlas and I'm looking, and I don't know how to read a map. I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? So my sister, she's like, well, I'll just come with you. So I said, okay, great. So
you can be driving and
I
she
can
can
be
be reading the 55 pages.
And it's not like she knows how to navigate. And, I have 5 brothers. So in between, like when I said I was leaving and when I started going, each of them is calling me and like, oh, look, you need to take 65 East and this is going to be the best route. And one is like, when you get to Pennsylvania, and I'm just like, this means nothing to me. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't want to like even think about this right now. I'm just going to, I got the 55 pages of Google Maps and I'm just going to follow that. That's all I could just think about. So I got the U-Haul hit to my car and, I have this Ford. So, it was nice. I had a little SUV and it was stuffed like from the back of, from the where my sister and I were in the front seat, like things were literally like hanging over our heads. And then I had the U-Haul packed and we just got ready to leave. And as we were trying to get out of my mom's driveway, the U-Haul got stuck in the mud. And it took me an hour and a half to get this and I kept thinking, God, is this a sign that I shouldn't go? I don't know what is happening right now. Like, I'm literally stuck in my mother's yard. Like, should I take this as a sign? So
Missouri didn't want to let you go.
I know. It was just so crazy. So finally, I get it out, and I'm standing there like we were supposed to leave 2 hours ago. And I'm sweaty because I've been in the back, like pushing while my sister's trying to drive it out. And so we finally like sat and like calmed down and cooled down. And I was like, okay, let's go. So we finally got on the road. And
I'm thinking, what do you think that move kind of in a slow motion gave you as opposed to a move today?
Yeah.
So today would have been, everything would have been quicker just because of all the technology we have. So in a way, did all the traveling to allow you to let everything sink in, or what gift did it give you? I'm guessing it gave you something.
That is so true because we had an 18-hour drive.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And I drove nearly the entire time. And I love driving. Driving has always been when I need to think through something, like when I got the job offer, I got in the car and I just took off. And so the entire time I'm just thinking and imagining what this is going to be like. I was going, it was like an emotional roller coaster because at times I was like, what are you doing? What are you thinking? You're going to be by yourself, away from your family, and your mom is older. How much more time are you going to have with her? And then it was exciting. I'm in a new place. I can be a new person, a different person. Because I grew up in a small town, Sikeston's like 17,000 people. Everybody knew each other. I'm the youngest of 9. So I don't really have my own identity. I'm one of the Ruckers. I'm the youngest. I'm the baby. Everybody knew my siblings. Anytime I introduced myself to anyone, oh, you're Brenda's sister. Oh, you're Wade's sister. Like nobody knew me as Sonia, you know. I mean, everybody knew me, but nobody really knew who I was. I'm not sure I knew who I was. So I began thinking like, okay, this is your chance to kind of figure out who you are, who you want to be, and like who you're going to present yourself to the world as. And so that part was exciting, you know, going somewhere where nobody knew me. I mean, I'm just thinking like, that's going to be pretty cool, you know, just kind of develop this person that, you know, for a long time has just been kind of like one of the Ruckers, you know, so that was exciting. Yeah.
So now, once you get here to Ithaca,
Yeah.
how long did it take you to feel like this was now your home?
Oh, wow. So when my sister and I got here, we got the key. They didn't tell us that I was supposed to call to get the electricity turned on. I didn't have any electricity. And so we got the car unloaded. We were exhausted. So it was a 1 bedroom, and then there was a couch that was like a pull-out bed. So my sister got on that. I got in that bed. We've been driving for 19 hours and I did not want to stop. She like forced me to pull over in Pennsylvania. We got a hotel and slept a few hours and got up and drove the rest of the way. So when we got there, we got into the house. It was so cute. And I was like, oh, this is beautiful, and loved it. And so then I just got in bed and we were like knocked out. And the next day I woke up and there was somebody banging on the door. I'm like, who is this? So I go down, I open the door, and there's this lady, this really pretty lady. She's like, hi, I'm Melinda Smith, who had called me that first time to offer, you know, for me to do a phone interview. And I was like, oh, what are you doing here? And she goes, I came to pick you up. There's a picnic on campus and you need to go. And I was like, I can't. I was like, there's a U-Haul. I just got here. I don't even have clothes. And she's like, it doesn't matter. Just put on something. I said, but I don't have electricity. She's like, put on a hat. I was like, I'm trying to think of everything in the world to get this lady out of my house. And she like unrelenting. And she's like,
come on, there's a picnic.
Come on. And so she comes up, introduces herself to my sister, and I'm in the back, like I take a cold shower because I didn't have any hot water, and throw on something and like did something to my hair. And then we left. We go over to Africana on campus, and we pull up and we go to the back. And this back is full of people. And not only is it full of people, it's full of people of color. And in Sikeston, in Missouri, that was not a sight you saw. Like just people of all races back there. And I am like, what is happening? How are all these people of color here together? I mean, it was just overwhelming. And she just started introducing me to people. And it was so funny because as we're like going through and I'm meeting everyone, and I am just like, I have never been in a space like this with, you know, just so much diversity all at once. And I mean, it was just amazing. And I just kind of, at a certain point, it just started to just feel so good. Like I was feeling, you know, because in Missouri, I mean, even though Cornell is a predominantly white institution, they do have these pockets where, you know, people gather together who are people of color. And in Missouri, that would have been a very rare thing for me to kind of experience where I was working. I mean, there were very few. I think there was probably like 10 people of color that I saw on a regular basis. And now I'm like with 100 people of color. And that was just like amazing to me. It was really kind of like, oh man, this is where I should be. Yeah, this feels
So that was kind of the beginning of you feeling, this is my home, I made a good decision.
I think it was the beginning of me feeling like I had made a good decision. You come to this place, this is going to be unlike what you've experienced in Missouri. And you are now starting to come to a point where I'm excited and I'm anticipating good things. And so that started to kind of sink in for me. And then my sister was here with me, and she was just amazing. Like, she unpacked everything. She got my kitchen together. She got the bedroom together. Like, I came home and I was like, oh my God, because I'm going to work every day. And she's just there, like, making my house, ready. Yeah, yeah. And to have her there with me, she stayed with me for about 2 weeks before she went back. And that was like amazing. It helped me kind of settle in. I knew somebody, she was with me, we would go out together exploring the city. And so that kind of helped me feel more comfortable. It was sad. I remember the day she left, and I was crying and like, okay, now you're really by yourself. And that was hard, but it was good. I mean, I started to every day meet more people, get more settled into my job. The semester started, I was super busy meeting people, and I met my good friends. Sarah and I were a part of a group of people. So one person I met was Danielle Terrance. Danielle and Sarah were very good friends. So that's how I started to meet people. I met Sarah, Audra, like all of these women who are still my friends today. Danielle passed away, but like those were my core group of friends, and we were extremely close. And that's when Ithaca really became home for me. Yeah.
How was your first winter?
My first winter was horrible, but it was like so cold. I could not even anticipate how cold it was. And I remember like walking out of my house that first day, and my face was just like, oh, what is happening? Yeah. So you're like, and I had, like no coat that was, good enough for the winter, because I come from Missouri. You barely wore a coat. Our winters aren't that brutal. So Melinda Smith, again, Melinda, who I love, who I'm still friends with, she's still here. She's retired now. She's like, oh, we got to go shopping. That coat is not good. And she's like, yeah, you need boots and you need gloves and you need scarves. And so Melinda, we went shopping, and I got all of my winter gear, like, that I needed, because I got here, I started in September, and then I had a couple of months. And so the first snow, I remember, and it was like mid-November, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so cold. And so after that, winter set in, and it just felt never ending. I mean, that was a rough winter because the whole mood changed. The dark, gloomy Ithaca.
The getting dark at 4:35 in the afternoon.
Yes. So that was hard. That was a hard
Now,
once.
at any point during that first winter, did you at any point start questioning your decision of having moved to Ithaca?
I won't say that I questioned it, because by that time I had met a lot of people and I was enjoying myself. This was such a new experience for me. And I just kind of felt, like, okay, you made a good decision. This is not going to be awful. You're not going to like fall apart. You're not, going to be depressed and sad. So that was kind of when I felt like, okay, this was what you were supposed to do. I was talking to my family all the time. I mean, my mother was calling me nonstop, and she had, you know, I think accepted that I was far away. I mean, I lived in Texas for grad school, so she was used to me, kind of being away, but this was different. And we had started talking about her coming to visit in the summer or the spring, once the weather got better, because in her mind, I could tell she just kept picturing New York City. And I needed her to know that I was not in New York City. She needed a different
Yeah.
visual to help her feel, because I could always feel that anxiety. She worries about us all the time. And I could tell, she would always, are you locking your doors? You're not, out at night. And, she was anxious.
Yes.
And I knew until she came and saw Ithaca.
What did she think? What did she feel?
My God, she loved it. I mean,
like, oh, if I
yeah,
you were here, I wouldn't have worried about you.
No, and that's what it was. She just thought, like, this is New York. And I'm like, Mom, this is upstate New York. This is not the city. And she met my friends and she saw my apartment and we went on campus and she's like, this place is so beautiful. We went to Gigantic Falls and it just blew her mind because she had grown up in Alabama. So she loves like these beautiful, hilly, green, outside places. She just fell in love with it. And then the whole thing with the Ithaca recycling, and she got all into that. And I mean, it was just like, she loved it. She just absolutely loved it. Yeah.
You have been here in Ithaca since 2003?
I actually left in 2011. And
oh my goodness.
I did. I left. And so nearly 10 years later, I went back to Missouri. And that was, my mom was about to have her second hip replacement. And I had been in Ithaca. I had, only maybe twice a year for winter break. And then in the summer, had a chance to go home. And I just felt like I needed to be with her.
She was in her 80s at this point.
She was in her 80s. Yeah, she was in her 80s. And I just felt like, I don't know how much time I'll have with her. She's about to have surgery. I want to be there to help out. And so it was another tough decision because I loved Ithaca. I loved my career. I loved my life here. But it was, one of those things where I said, I need to go home and, be with my mom. And that again, it was kind of the reverse of like stopping my life here, getting rid of stuff, packing up, moving back to Missouri like I did, 10 years before. And
but now tell me something, because the Sonia who moved to Ithaca the first time was about to begin the process of finding out who she was and who she wanted to be.
Yeah.
That many years later, when you come back to Missouri.
Yeah. It was hard.
Who was Sonia? Had you found yourself? Have you defined what person you wanted to be? Were you that person now?
I was. I think I was probably maybe a few years away, but I had really kind of established a lot of things in my mind, especially around my identity as a woman of color. And I knew it was going to be hard to go back to Missouri. I knew what it was like there. I knew that there was racism. I knew that there was sexism. It was kind of a Southern, people always think of Missouri as the Midwest, but where I lived, we were in a very Southern Christian conservative area. And I was coming back. I had changed a lot. I had even changed physically. And going back home, the first few weeks, I was in like a complete state of depression. And
Wow.
I got into, you know, being in my bed all day.
Oh, Sonia.
Yeah, I mean, I was like totally depressed. Just, I had crammed all my stuff into my old bedroom, and I'm sleeping in bed, and I would get up and my mom would be on the end of her bed, like waiting for me to come out of the room. And I just go get something to eat, go back to my room and just go back in there. And I mean, it was hard. And then she started to like get ready for her surgery. So I started taking her to doctor's appointments. That was the thing that kind of got me out of the house. And then starting to get ready for the surgery. And so I had decided to just kind of help her through, that process of getting out of bed and starting the therapy, the physical therapy. And so that was where I finally just started getting up every day and getting dressed and helping her. And I hadn't started even looking for a job yet. So I was keeping busy with her, and then started cooking again and getting back into, living. And then, but this was weeks after I got there. It was a while before I really kind of got, you know.
Tell me if I imagine this correctly, or if I interpret this correctly. Your depression. So it's kind of, you went out, you saw what life, how rich and wonderful life could be.
Yeah.
And then you went back to like how colorful life would be. And then you just went back to a town where maybe for you, things were just two colors or very simple things. Was it like that?
Yeah, it was just like that. Because when I left here, I was working at the Johnson Business School. So I was traveling, I was doing recruitment. I would be going, I was in LA, I was Chicago, I was in New York City. We were having events, we had cocktail parties, receptions, working with all these companies. We worked with a lot of Fortune 500 companies. They had receptions. We would be going to, these really beautiful spaces and, drinking wine here in Ithaca, going to the vineyards, hanging out with my girls. Every Wednesday, we would meet downtown for drinks. And I mean, I had a life. And then I went to Missouri and it was like, like everything just stopped. And I just felt like, man, why did I do this? And I was like questioning the decision I made. And then in the middle of like my mom having her surgery, she's starting to get back up and she's doing really well. I got a phone call, and my friend Danielle, who had introduced me to Sarah, she found out she had cancer. It was stage 4. And terminal. And oh my gosh. Because Danielle, by the time, had moved to Ohio to get her PhD. So she had not been living in Ithaca, but we were still close and seeing her. And it just devastated us. I mean, it just did not seem real. Like, what do you mean? Are you going to die? That just, no. And we were all like in different places. And I ended up, because everything happened so fast. Like, she literally told us she had cancer, and then the next thing we knew, she's saying she's going into hospice. I mean, it was just that fast. And I flew back to Ithaca, and we all went to Buffalo where she was, and went to where she was at the hospice and saw her. And I mean, it was so hard. It's just trying to even wrap our minds around it, And like Danielle was our glue. She, was always the one coordinating things, pulling everybody together. Let's do this. And, it just, seeing her and knowing that when I left, it would be the last time,
Mhm.
you know. And this was just a few months after I'd gone back to Missouri, just a couple months later. And then a few weeks after that, you know, she passed away. Yeah, and it's like things started changing quickly after that. So
What happened to your life or with your life?
I felt like I needed to get myself together. Like you've wasted a lot of time. I mean, not, I mean, those first few weeks, of course, I was so depressed, and then started helping my mom. My niece had had a baby, and I was like keeping her baby. Like he was like my heart. My great nephew, I was watching him every day, and loving that. But I was like, you need to get a job and get your career back and start living again. And I think Danielle passing away was like the catalyst for me. You know, like you don't know how much time you have. You gotta, I mean, Danielle she just finished her PhD. She's going back to she grew up on a Mohawk reservation outside of Buffalo. She was going to work for the reservation. She was so happy and so excited. And then she was gone. Yeah. So I knew like you need to get with it, you know, stop messing around. So I started looking to get a job at the university. Yeah.
Did you go back to the people who told you
If I did. So Dr.
years
Wynn,
before, if this
yeah.
doesn't work out, please come back to us?
So this is 10 years later. So Dr. Wynn had retired, but I did go back to the university. I still had some friends there. And I finally, so I ended up, I didn't want to just take, you know, I could have taken a lower level job, but at that point I had really kind of thought through like, you know, I want to move into diversity and equity. I want to do something for this community that I felt had been lacking, the things that I had seen at Cornell, the experiences I had working in diversity. I wanted to bring that there. I wanted to kind of create a climate that was different from the one that I had experienced. So I really was kind of focused on getting that type of job. And then I ended up seeing a position that was open as the equity officer. And I applied for it. It took a long time. I finally got an interview. I did an interview. The interview went really, really well, but then I didn't hear anything. And so I started kind of thinking, okay, well, maybe Missouri is not going to work out. My brother lived outside of Louisville, Kentucky, which is only 4 hours away, because I had made the decision I'm not going to be more than 4 hours from my mom. You know, I need to be able to come home for weekends. And then I kind of decided to go to Louisville for the weekend and then start looking for a job there. And then my phone rang, and it was this lady, Kathy, offering me the job. And I was like, what? I was like, I literally have my car packed with my suitcases to go to Kentucky. And I was like, oh, wow, this is fantastic. So my mom was so excited because I think she was like, here she is with this car packed up again. So I was like, guess what, Mom? I'm gonna stay here. So she was so happy. I mean, she was just ecstatic, you know, she's gonna be right where I could see her. And yeah, so I got the job at the university and in the position that I wanted, in the equity position. And I mean, I was a completely different person at that point. Some people that worked at the university knew me previously. And it was interesting to even see how they reacted to me. Because they did see like a completely different person than the one they had known 10 years ago.
In what ways?
I was more confident. I think physically I looked different to some people. I spoke differently. I thought differently. The way I interacted with people was different. I was more self-confident. I was more, I think, in tune to how I wanted to be seen and received by people. I think there are people in that community who, if they see you as a person of color, they immediately start making assumptions about who you are.
Mhm.
And I was not going to stand for people, being condescending to me, talking down to me, treating me um, in any way that I felt was biased or it was just, for me, important to establish with people who I was.
Mhm.
And I just set out to do that and to be that person.
Mhm.
And I think I was. I think I was that person after 10 years of being away. I was that person.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, before going to the no moment,
Uh-huh.
um, what is the most valuable thing you think gave you these first years gave you of going first applying to a place without expectations that they're gonna call you back,
Yeah.
then getting the interviews and getting the job and getting the so all this yes and all this experience, what was what is right now the most valuable gift you think it gave you?
I think it gave me the gift of discovering who I was at my core.
Mhm.
I had two parents who were not terribly educated, but they were the most loving, caring, wonderful parents God could have given me. I mean, the love that they gave us was the platform that we all needed to go out into the world, in a world that people who would look at us and not see any value in us.
Mhm.
It didn't matter because we knew we were loved. We knew that we were special. We knew that we were able to kind of go out and kind of do the things that we needed to do and always be able to come back home to that loving atmosphere. And
Mhm.
so, not having education, not having a lot of money, not having a lot of experience working or doing the things that their kids were doing, it didn't matter.
Mhm.
They were interested in what we were doing. They were supportive. They were always engaged. They were always happy and always excited. I mean, just walking in the house and, seeing my mother's eyes light up anytime she saw any child or her grandchild or great grandchild. I mean, I know not everybody has that.
Mhm.
And for me, that was important. And then I had to take that and kind of make a life for myself. And I did that by going to college and going to grad school and getting a job and working every day. And then coming to this point when I came to Ithaca where nobody knew me, I had another gift of just kind of exploring everything new here, being
Mhm.
around people in this, world-class university, interesting people with a lot of money, experiencing new things. I made this whole new group of friends. Um, I mean, I just had an opportunity to kind of figure out, what kind of person, what kind of adult I wanted to be, and figure out what things were important to me, to be around other people of color, people from all over the world. I I mean, I feel embarrassed now, but it just like when I would meet people and they would tell me where they were from, like sometimes I had no idea, like where are you from? And
Where in the map is
I
that?
know, I know, I know. And then people were always asking me, like, what are you? And I would just say, oh, I'm Black, from the South. And I would have people from like West Africa and they would say, you look West African. I bet you're Ghanaian. Are you Ghanaian? I'm like, I don't know. You know, so it was always like anytime I would meet someone, they were Dominican, they were Puerto Rican, they were Ghanaian, they were Haitian. And I started to also kind of feel like, oh, I need to figure out and discover who I am. I'm not just Black. You know, I wanted to kind of explore that. So, I mean, all of that was so exciting to me. And it just kind of opened my eyes to like this very rich tapestry. Like people were just so fascinating. And when I was home, it was just like black, white. And it's, you know, yeah, we didn't even have a lot of other, you know, cultural representation in the community when I was a kid. You know, now it's more diverse, but when I came here, it's just like, it just made me appreciate how wonderful it is to be around these interesting people who are so different from me, who I could learn so much from and just really connected to. And I just became, I'm a very introverted person. I was really shy as a kid. I barely talked to people I didn't know. And then when I came back home, you know, I'm talking to large groups of people, you know, I'm just like a different person to a lot of people. I mean, I had 10 years to kind of see this happen, but when I came back home, people were like, what happened? I know, like you are not the little girl, you know, you were when you were here, like the little shy girl sitting in the corner. Yeah. So that gift, I think that gift was just like coming into myself and being this person that was more outgoing, more open, more engaged, and just passionate about my career. And so I think that kind of, I would say, is like the biggest gift.
And it's interesting because if we go back to the moment when you said, well, and then there were all these other jobs that were announced in the Chronicle of Higher Education, there must have been something inside of you that had that little curiosity about that other world that was there that you weren't sure about. Otherwise, you could have read all those job positions and just keep them. Like, why apply to Cornell or why apply to something in New York?
I know. And I think if people have asked me that, and I honestly think it was so completely different. I remember I applied to 3 other jobs. So one was in Illinois, one was in Kentucky, and I think the other one was in St. Louis. So all within like a few hours of where I was in Missouri. And then this job at Cornell. And when I read the job description was the Office of Minority Educational Affairs. And, you know, it was everything that I loved, you know, working with students of color. And I had a counseling and social work background and doing counseling and community outreach, providing support. I was also a crisis manager, so I had been a social worker. So that job description was like, man, I would love to do something like that. Even when I applied for it, I was thinking that sounds amazing, but I thought there's no way they're going to choose me. So it was kind of like you know, I would love to do that, but there's no way they would ever select me. And then they did. So I had my dream job doing.
Not only did they select you, they fought for you.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, all the things you described are like, wow.
Yeah.
They really wanted you.
I know, which is even more surprising. Because even at that time, I think when I did the interview, you know, I talked to Melinda and she was like, yeah, you were fantastic in your interview. And even that was interesting to hear because I didn't see myself as fantastic. I hadn't really, in my mind, had developed any kind of understanding of any skills that I had, anything about me that was special. I hadn't really figured that out or identified any of that at that point. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, one last question before going to the no.
Mhm.
And every time I get to this question, I forget what the question was. Wait. So, yes. So you're back at Cornell.
I'm back at Cornell.
So I know this is not the years you wanted to talk about, and we don't have time to talk about it, but I do want you to tell us what happened. So you came here, stayed for 10 years, you went back to Missouri,
Mhm.
you had all this the crisis, and then you helped your mom, and then your friend passed away. You got this kind of wake-up call of I need to get
Yeah.
back and do something with my life. Between then and now, what happened? How did you come back to Ithaca?
Well, I got a job back at the university where I worked before I came to Cornell. I got the job as the equity officer. I actually requested to have my position elevated because I felt like I needed to. People need to know this is an important position. So I had an amazing supervisor. Kathy Mangles was my supervisor, extremely supportive. She talked to the president, and within a year, I was promoted to the assistant to the president for Equity University. So I became a member of the executive team.
Wow.
And that it was the most amazing opportunity because we had our first Hispanic president. He and I started within months of each other. And then like a year later, I'm working for him. And I'm a member of his cabinet. And I just started to do really well in my career. I became dean of students, and then before I left, I was a vice president. He had just given me my own division. And July of 2021, my mom turned 91 on July 8th. And then 7 days later, she passed away.
Oh no, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Thank you. Yeah. So July 2021, she passed away on July 15th. And that, of course, was devastating, really hard. But she was so happy and so, I think, so serene, and just seeing her face, because the day she had her birthday, we had a lot of people over. Everyone was there, and she just looked so completely satisfied, and like everything I think for her was done at that point. And that was hard. And a few weeks later, I got a call from an agency, and they said, there's a position at Cornell University and someone nominated you for it. And I was like, what? And so I could not believe it. It's just so full circle. Like I left to go home to be with my mom, and then a few weeks after she dies, Cornell calls me back. And I interviewed for the job and started in October of 2021.
So now when you went back and you had this new job, you never considered coming back to Cornell or to Ithaca, or was that somehow in the back of your mind, like, I wish one day I would go back?
I had been approached a few years before. There was another position that was open, and some people who I had worked with previously reached out and asked if I would interview for the job. And I was still coming back to Ithaca to see my friends. I would come in the summer. When Danielle passed away, we would all meet, all of us would meet again to go visit her grave. And so during one of those trips, they asked if I would just interview for the job while I was here. So I did. I got the job offer, but I ended up talking to my president in Missouri, and he actually, that's when he made me the dean of students. He's like, no, I want you to stay here and I want you to be my dean of students. And so I ended up staying there.
So interesting how Missouri and New York really, really want you.
Well, I know it's weird. I've only worked for those two places and kind of like ping ponged back and forth. And yeah, so it was, I didn't know what to expect. I think in my mind, I didn't really think I wanted to come back to Cornell at that time.
Mhm.
I was still happy doing the work that I was doing.
Mhm.
And so when I told him about the job, I didn't know what to expect, but the fact that he's like, no, I want you to be the dean of students. I thought, oh, wow, okay, this is great. So I can, yeah, yeah,
And in a way, it was also a gift, so you
Mhm.
could stay there
yeah,
until your mom said
yeah.
goodbye.
I know. I stayed. I didn't even tell her about that job either. So,
Can you imagine?
I know.
Mom, well, guess what? Remember back.
Again. Yeah, so I mean, it was good. I always feel like I've had these, I mean, working with our first Hispanic president and seeing what he went through, and we had this dynamic. I mean, he would always, tell me like, Sonia, you have got to, don't be so emotional, and I would get so upset, and I would cause him so much grief. I would do or say something and people would be calling him. But like when I got ready to leave, he told me, like I've learned so much from you. And I said, I've learned so much from you too, because he was an older man and I was younger and very kind of focused on, when things weren't right, I was going to speak up. And he was always worried about me. And he would say, Sonia, these people, you have to be careful. And I'm like, I am not going to be careful. Because I had grown up. I told him I grew up here. I know what needs to change.
Mhm.
And I think he in the end, he would always say, like, I know why you fought so much for, things. But I think he was always just worried about me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we now need to go to the no moments. So after all this beautiful, magical trip to Ithaca and back to Missouri and back to Ithaca, now tell me, what was that other moment in your life when you decided that saying no was a much better option?
Saying no.
Yes.
Well, I actually think, oh man, saying no was a better option. It may have been when I got the job offer to come back here before. It was exciting to think that I could come back to Ithaca at that time.
Mhm.
I still had all these great memories. I still had all these great friends here.
Mhm.
I knew I would come back and my career, would keep going. But I've always struggled between work and family.
Mhm.
And at times I put work first. And this time I knew I needed to think about my family because at that time my mom was even older.
Mhm.
I had this great nephew who I just adored. He was just like the love of my life. And I couldn't even like imagine not seeing him every day.
Mhm.
And I was not exactly sure what was going to happen, but with my president offering me this, he's like, no, stay and be the dean of students. I was like,
He made it easier.
made it easier. I wasn't ready to leave my family,
Mhm.
and I'm glad I did.
So interesting, no? When you left,
Yeah.
it was very important for you
hmm
what your family thought, but you wanted this, and in a way, having said yes to coming here and finding out who you were and building a career with your own rules
Yeah.
allows you to those many years later say, well, now I know who I am. I
Yeah.
know what I stand for. This is
Mhm.
now time for my family. Thank you very much. I'll stay.
Yes, absolutely. That
Mhm.
was it. And I think, again, I had become this kind of person that was able to kind of put those things in the proper perspective
Mhm,
of, you know, realizing I got so much joy
mhm.
from, you know, again, like walking in the house and seeing my mom and my nephew and holding him and watching him walk and, you know, being with my family, my sister, and, you know, all of those moments.
Mhm.
Because we're a close family, even though we've kind of lived in different places, we're very close, and just, you know, cooking dinner, Thanksgiving dinner, Sunday dinner, and just it was a good move to stay in that space for the time that I did. And I didn't know that I knew I probably wouldn't have my mom for much longer. I didn't know how much longer, but um, knowing that I had those last 10 years with her, it's a gift too.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, Sonia, I am so glad that Sarah introduced us.
Me too.
It's been lovely talking with you. Any final words you have before we close this conversation?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I haven't thought about these things in so long. So it's nice to kind of, you know, remember coming to Ithaca and, you know, all the decisions that I had to make at that time. So thank you. Thank you so much for letting me talk to you about this.
No, my pleasure. Thank you so much. Well, so last thing before we close, please now send me pictures
Okay.
of whatever is related to your yes, but images and pictures you feel comfortable sharing with the audience.
Okay.
I'll add them to the interview, and well, in the name of Ithaca, we're
Mhm.
so glad you're here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I hope I meet you in person one day. I
Me
mean, we live
too.
in the same city.
Me too.
So
Yeah, so
thank you so much and have a beautiful weekend.
thank you. You too. Bye-bye.